you need to know what we're gonna sing for Kafismi, okay? Get that straight in your head and open up and listen for the tonality so that we don't have gaps in the service. Okay, Prakimni. The Prakimni on Utrija have a structure to them that's common for 98% of Prakimni that you'll have. Nothing in Ustav is 100%. And basically, the way that they start is that the altar server, diakon or priest, will say the first and second parts of the Prakimni in a rapid fashion. Okay? And for example, the one that we sang last night, Воскресни Господи Боже мой, да вознесется рука Твоя, is the first part of the whole Prakimni. The second part is Не забуди убогих Твоих до конца. So the priest will say that entire text. We will sing that entire text, as we did last night. The altar server will then recite a stich, which is not the same as the Prakimni. We repeat the Prakimni in its entirety. And then the third time, the altar server will say the first part of the Prakimni, Воскресни Господи Боже мой, да вознесется рука Твоя, and we finish it. Не забуди убогих Твоих до конца. That's the form of Prakimni that works on Utrija, Liturgia, and many, many other applications. Okay. Right after that, we have Всякое дыхание да хвалит Господа, which follows exactly the same routine. Священник, Всякое дыхание да хвалит Господа, we sing the whole thing. He has a stich, we sing the whole same thing. He says, Всякое дыхание, and we'll do да хвалит Господа, same exact format. So, now a favorite topic of ours, Kanon. This is something that tends to baffle people. What I've tried to do is to put it in a way that will make it graphically easy to understand. So the Kanon is comprised of 9 pieces, okay? In typical practice, not during Veliki Post, the second one is omitted. Okay, so we go 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. I'll just tell you a short story about the second one. Many years ago when we were in Boston, I was reading up on this stuff and I came across the reason why the second one is typically not sung. And the reason happens to be that it's of a particularly repentive nature. So in services during Veliki Post, if you remember Kanon Andreja Krivskova, there is in fact a second piece. And there are other services where it exists. But so I found that reason and just sort of put it together. That next Saturday night I was in church, and a young fellow that sang in the choir, we got the Kanon and we're singing it, and he sort of looked at me a little bit like an authority figure. And mind you, I just read this, during that week, first time. I had no idea about this. And so he says to me, Andrei, а почему вторую песню пропускают? Andrei, well, why do they skip the second one? And without skipping a beat, I just said, well, it's very repentive in nature, and it's taken out of the normal Sunday services and turned away. And he was amazed that I knew this level of detail. I think it was just dumb luck. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. But I had that answer. He asked the right question for the right answer. So the structure is every piece, every mode. I'm not sure how to call it. Let's all call it piece. Has an irmos, which is the first part of it. Then it has multiple stichi and trapari, which are typically read. Okay? And then it has a katavasi. So that block of Kesnya 1 is repeated for each one of the pieces. Okay? The parts that are read, they have stichi and trapari. And if you notice, like last night, we sang the first irmos, and then I think it was Yura began reading Voskresny, Slava Господи, Святому Воскресению Твоему, and then he read Atrapai. And then I think it was probably Nikita, there was no Kreste Воскресный. Nikita read Prесвятая Богородица Спаси нас and Atrapai. And then Marina, I think it was, read Святые, I don't remember exactly, but basically Святые Отцы молите Бога нас. And the corresponding tropari to them. Then there was one on Slava and one on Imeni. Okay? That's the form of every one of the songs of the canon. Okay? Between the third and fourth and the sixth and seventh, there's an iktinya, an additional reading. These can be Sidalni, Kandaki, Yikasi. Those are indicated in the Typikon as to what has to happen when. Okay. For our singer purposes, okay, we sing the irmos of each one of the songs. That's a rule. Okay. We also sing Katavasi, but we don't sing all of them. We sing the one for the first, the third, the sixth, the eighth after Clyde, and the ninth. Why do we do that? Because we do, and it's okay. In some churches, they sing every Katavasya for every song. At Sabor, they sing every Katavasya. In other churches, they abbreviate this tremendously, and some don't even sing Katavasya. So it's not that we're right or we're wrong. That's the practice in the cathedral, in the parish, and so forth. There's a little bit of logic to it. Okay? Traditionally, many parishes have sung Katavasya after the third, sixth, eighth, and ninth. That tradition is here as well. The reason we sing the first one is if any of you are speed readers, you know, if you need to read a long document, typically what I do is I'll read the first sentence and the last sentence of the paragraph. And if it makes sense, then I don't need the paragraph anymore going on. Okay? Well, Kanon is a little like that. Not exactly, but if you start with this Katavasi, you're sort of starting in the middle. So that's why it's appropriate to start with the first one and then, you know, skip according to tradition makes sense. Off topic, I'll tell you. Those of you who have ever heard about the Boston Pops, has anybody not heard of the Boston Pops? Boston Pops is the entertaining part of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. They do Christmas concerts and lighted stuff. And for the longest time, Arthur Fiedler was the conductor of the Boston Pops. And he was, you know, he was always pictured as this nice old gentlemanly, you know, grandfather type. Where in actual practice, he was not that nice a guy. He was a pretty thorny individual. And he hated to rehearse. So he would come in, you know, and the second chair players from the symphony and the others would be sitting there trying to rehearse Christmas Pops. And he'd come in, and, all right, let's start from the middle. And he would just mess with them like that. Let's start from the middle. Nobody knew what to play. Anyway, so we don't want to start with the middle. That's the point. Okay? A couple of red dot places. From the Katavasya of the first song, first Pesnya, to the Irmos of the third Pesnya. Nothing happens in between there. That's a rapid fire spot. Okay? So, I wish I had something to point with. I need a longer hand. So, when Medina is reading this, or Yura, or somebody is reading this, okay, obviously our first responsibility is to listen, because that's what the whole point of the reading is, for us to understand what it's being talked about. But in this particular case, as you're listening, you really need to get this together, Okay, so you're gonna sing this, you need to have something in the book that can get you to this quickly, okay? Other situations like this. Eighth, Irmos. Once we sing it, we sing the Katavasya. So this is Party, Благословен, Поклоняемся Господу, and so forth. Then we sing the Katavasya. There is there is an intonation here, but this Величие Душа моя Господа is in a completely different section. So again, as you're in this part of the service, at the latest, at this part of the service, you need to mark the fact that you're going to a Katavasya. Where is it? You need to mark the Величие Душа моя Господа version that we're going to sing. Yesterday we sang Nishnikova. And from here, you need to get back to the Irmos. So you have two steps that you have to plan ahead on in this situation. Overall, on Kanon, okay, this unfortunately is a good place where people's minds tend to wander. Somebody's reading, it's none of my business. You know, I've been in church for an hour and a half. This is where minds tend to wander, okay? In each one of these песни, as I said, there's воскресные, креsto воскресные, святым, whatever the combinations are, these can change. What doesn't change is at some point in time, there will be Slava Inynya or Inynya. When you hear the word Inynya, choir members, that means you have to get back in and start focusing. So, you know, if your mind is wandering here, that's between you and the Maker. But once you hear Inynya, you've got to get straight back, find what you're going to do, and be ready to sing. Because what we cannot tolerate is when it comes to either singing the next Irmos or Katavasya, for there to be running around the choir loft. Oh, gee, I didn't know. Inynya, there's just, once you hear that, you've got about 35 seconds to get your guard together. So I think we talked about this. Liturgia.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Is the Katavasya and what we sing prescribed in the Typicon, or is that,
Yeah.
It is?
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes it seems like, oh, let's sing this, or.
No,
but
that's absolutely prescribed, yeah.
One question. The second question, can you give a quick overview of the voices and why we have different voices? Is it to cover the material over 8 weeks? You know, we have first, what is
the
the
tones.
Tones, I'm sorry. Is that for another time?
Well, there's going to be a whole workshop on the 8 tones.
Okay.
So I haven't done all of the research that I need to yet, okay? But there's sort of a two-ended scale here. The fathers basically determined that to do the exact same service, the exact same way every week and week out is just going to get a little too redundant. Okay. On the other hand, they realized that if you do every day completely different, it's going to be impractical to be able to do the service. So that's why they established, and this I think is even, well, I'm afraid to say, that's why they established a repetitive cyclic thing. Okay. Did I answer your question?
I think so, but I mean, every week when you repeat them, the words are different as well as the music, and is the point that you, and then you have a cycle,
Right.
so is that in order to cover the entire?
Right, right. So the text that you sing in the first stihira of Господи возвах for first tone is different from that same stihira 8th tone.
Right, so by the time you get through, you cover.
Yeah, you
some
cover
body.
basically everything that they wanted to get covered in the 8-week cycle. Okay, so liturgia. There's really two parts of liturgia, two main parts. One is liturgia oglašendik, which means anybody can attend. And then we'll see later on, at this point, is liturgia verdik, which is, these are the catechumens, these are of the faith. Okay? So in the first part of liturgia, and these literally, you know, like I showed you know, here's Великая Тиня, Благослови Душа моя Господа, and so forth. So this marches right through. The Благослови Душа моя Господа, Хвали Душа моя Господа, when they're sung, and that's typically on Sunday services, and well, let's leave it for that, on Sunday services, those are psalms that have been abbreviated in what we sing, that essentially are gratitude to the Lord for all that He's done for mankind. Единородный Сын is the teaching and the glorification of the second Yitzhak, the second face of God, the Son of God. And I have an error here. This shouldn't be a star here, I'm sorry. I'll get to that later. And then заповеди блаженства are those things that we should strive to do to become closer to God. It's interesting that if you look at the Ten Commandments in заповеди блаженства, 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not this, thou shalt not that, thou shalt not. So these are things you're not supposed to do. Okay? Заповеди блаженства is different. It says, these are things you should strive to do. Okay? They all pull towards the same direction, but their orientation is different. Okay? Just a little thing to keep in mind when you're singing it. Okay. So these are, and this is from the Sermon on the Mount, the заповеди блаженства. Малый вход, when we typically sing, перейдите, поклонимся, that is actually the commemoration of Christ after his baptism, coming out to the world and beginning his ministry. So when you see Отец Стефан coming out at «Придите, поклонимся», okay, that symbolically is Christ coming out to the world with actual sermons and ministry. Okay. All of these